Scott, welcome to the show, man.
Mark, it is awesome to be here. I am happy to be talking to you today and hope we can give some great value to you and your listeners.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to dive into this. I know we tried to make this happen before the new year and had a couple hiccups that were on my end, so I'm grateful that
Well,
we're.
we had them on my end too. I was having computer problems and you were having email problems, but that's the way of the world today.
It is, it is. And this is just for those listening and watching. This is my first recording of 2021. It's not going to be the first episode that I release this year, but it's going to. This is my first time behind the mic in several weeks because I took most of December off for the holidays. So bear with me if we're a little rusty here.
It's okay. That'll make me look good.
Oh, there you go. So let's dive in because again, this is an important topic and one that I know I need help with too. So before we get there though, unpack like what do you have going on at home? Tell us a little bit more about you.
Sure. So I am married. My wife and I have been married 28 years, working on our 29th year. We have a
Congratulations.
17-year-old son at home. Anyway, he's a great young man, and he really is.
Yeah.
He's one of those kids that we've been blessed with a young man who has a really good heart. He's got a good heart for God. He's got a good heart for people. Constantly wants to help other folks. It's one of these things where Mom and I have done a good job of raising a good adult. So we're pretty proud of him. We live out in the middle of nowhere. The way I describe it to folks is I live 45 minutes from the closest Walmart, Starbucks, or McDonald's.
That
Gives
is
you
in
a
the
clue.
middle of nowhere.
Yeah, that's in the middle of nowhere.
I've seen a
We've
few
all
Walmarts that are in the middle of nowhere.
exactly, yeah, and we're still 45 minutes from those Walmarts.
Uh,
Basically, we're country folk, so we've lived out here since the late 90s. We live with my mother-in-law. And no, that's actually not a bad thing. Before anyone asks, my mother-in-law is actually who introduced me to my wife. So my mother-in-law and I worked together for 4 or 5 years before I even met her daughter.
oh, wow.
So that one we've been friends longer than I've known. I've been friends with her longer than I've been friends with my wife. So that's kind of how that works. And then we currently run our own coaching business. My wife and I do some of that together. I'm kind of the front person and do the speaking and the coaching and a lot of that, and she helps out with the behind the scenes stuff quite a bit. She occasionally helps with a speaking event or a coaching event, but more often than not, she's kind of done the behind the scenes stuff. And we've been running that business since 2011. Took it full time in 2017.
Very cool. Well, let's dive into that and unpack that a little bit more. I could attempt to explain what you do in terms of coaching, but let's hear it from you. Tell us exactly what you do with with Inspired Stewardship, and then how you help folks.
Sure. So my brand is Inspired Stewardship, as you just said, and I consider myself a stewardship coach. So what does that mean? It means I help Christians master their time, their talent, and their treasures so that they can live out their calling. Practical, what that looks like is I spend a lot of time working. People usually come to me either because they want to work on their money or they want to work on their productivity. They want to work on their time.
Mm.
And that's kind of what attracts them. But, you know, secretly, what I'm really working on is mindset, belief, behavior. That's the underlying, that's the talent component. And to me, that really underlines everything that I do. Because let's face it, comes to money, people know what they need to do. The problem is we usually aren't doing it.
Yeah.
When it comes to time, we know what we need to do. The problem is we're usually not doing it. So
Yeah.
as a coach, my job isn't to come in and tell you what's important to you. My job is to help draw out of you what is important to you, what are your values, what are your priorities, what are you trying to achieve, and then help you set up a plan and gain control of what's going on so you can achieve those things. It's really all I do. Um, the problem is it's something that most of us need, and yet most of us don't recognize that we need it. Instead, we just kind of keep bebopping through life the same way we always have and getting the same results we always have.
Yeah. Man, now I'm even more excited to dive into this. You're speaking my language here, not so much on the money side of things, but just as far as like, exactly what you just said. This is good. So what did you do before this career? Because I know you had a separate career before
I've
this.
had a couple of them. So I first actually I started working in terms of entrepreneur stuff. I've actually always had a side business since I was 12 years old. I literally filed taxes for the first time at like 14 or something. I've always done that. I've always had that sort of thing. But I went to college with the idea of I was going to go into medical research. So I have a degree in biochemistry, a second degree in genetics. Um, Started doing research work and figured out real quickly that I did not enjoy this. It was really about getting grants and getting money more than doing research.
Mhm.
So I became a school teacher. So I was a science teacher for 16 years. I taught middle school and high school. I've taught pretty much every grade from 6 through 12 except 8th grade. That's because 8th grade is usually earth science in Texas, and I don't do rocks. I do all the other stuff, and basically did that for 16 years. Loved it, but at the same time, in 16 years, I started out making like 32,000, and after 16 years, I was making like 41,000, which is really hard to support a young family and growing family on. It was a lot
Sure.
of time, a lot of effort, a lot of work. And so I pivoted and went into corporate, and I started working for a testing company. I worked for them for 11 years. So I became what is known as a senior director, simply meaning I had folks reporting to me who had folks reporting to them. So I was the leader of leaders, and did a lot of operational work, a lot of contract work, flying all over the country, meeting with state school boards and that government agencies and all of that, delivering the test, designing the test, building the test, and I kind of ran the team that did that. So because of that, I was a road warrior. I was on the road,
Mhm.
3 or 4 months out of the year total, not sequential, but across a year. And
Mhm.
again, after 11 years, that got old.
Sure.
In the meantime, I started my coaching business on the side while I was at the corporate gig. Started that back in 2011. It was my side hustle. And as it continued to grow and I felt more and more passion for it and recognized that this was really my calling, my mother's joke is actually, you've been a coach since you were 8. You just didn't call it that. That's when I pivoted and started growing it. And then I put in my notice a year before I actually left my corporate gig. So I
Oh,
gave them
wow.
a year's notice in writing,
That's pretty
uh,
unheard of.
and then left. And that's been my full-time gig ever since.
Okay. So it sounds like this has always kind of been inside of you, but was
Oh,
there
yeah.
like a specific trigger that where it became crystal clear? It's like, yes, this is what I need to do full time.
It isn't. That's the honest answer, and people think about that with calling questions, because I work with a lot of folks that have a passion project or something that they wish that they were doing full time, but it's not quite yet there. And I think we all look for this magic, bolt from above, or this stone tablet that arrives, and this is what you should do. And instead, what I found is it is an organic process. It's a matter of connecting those dots in reverse, is what I like to call it. So it's spending that time to really reflect on, what have you loved doing? What's been important to you? Where have you felt the most alive? Where does that energy come from? What are the days that, at the end of it, you're like, give me more. I want 12 more hours of this, as opposed to, I need a nap.
Yeah.
This has drained me. And as you begin to kind of reflect on that and connect those dots, usually you can start to craft something that and design something that fulfills and checks many of those boxes. Now, there's no such thing as the perfect job. There's no such thing as the perfect career. All of us have days where it's like, yeah, I don't need another day like that. But can you have more of those days where at the end of the day you're just as energized as you begin? Can you design that? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But it's deliberate. It's an intentional process. So it wasn't a bolt from a blue or single event or anything else. It was just more of beginning to spend that time with myself to recognize, no, this is really what I want to do. Because I've always been a coach. When I was in corporate, I was coaching leaders.
Sure.
When I was in education, I was coaching students and other teachers, because I did a lot of education of other teachers. I was involved in a lot of educational reform and other things like that. So I've always done the coaching. I technically didn't have the title of coach.
Sure. Sure. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's the value of having a side hustle. You always have to balance it with family, right? You don't want to like burn the
Right.
candle up on both ends and steal time away from what's most important. But if you do have that burning desire to do something bigger, a side hustle is a great way to kind of explore that
Mm-hmm.
and scratch that itch and see if there's something there, and then work through the process and see, is there a way to turn this into more of a viable long-term money making thing, or is it more of just a hobby? And
Right.
I think
And there's value to both.
there's value to both.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think it's a healthy exercise to go through and see certain seasons of life is to explore those and turn them into a bit of a side hustle more than just a hobby.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would agree. I mean, I think I I'm of the school of thought that you should always have more than one, whether you want to call it stream of income, activities going on. Again, like you said, not sacrificing what's important to you. The first thing that goes on my calendar is family time.
Yeah.
That gets blocked off before everything else because that's most important. That and my time with God. So those two things are, boom, those are blocked off. But then beyond that, now what do I want to do? And usually there's still a lot of time left over to do other things. And some of that should be exploring hobbies, exploring passion projects, creating side hustles. If you can create multiple streams of income or multiple things going on, it gives you flexibility, it gives you stability, it gives you freedom, it gives you the ability to explore those things in a safe way without having to put all the poker chips into the center of the table and go, I'm all in, burn the bridges and burn the boats and we've got to make this work. If that's how you work, fine, do it that way. But honestly, that's not real. That works a lot in the movies. It doesn't work as well typically in real life, if that makes sense.
Prior to this call, I was poking around on your website a little bit and I saw a phrase repeated: living a fully authentic life.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we're kind of dancing around in that a little bit, but I wanted to give you a chance to unpack that a little bit more. What do you mean by living a fully authentic life?
It means really connecting to who you are. I think a lot of us wear a lot of masks. We put on a lot of facades for the world, and there's nothing wrong with the idea of, yes, you have different roles, you have different responsibilities, you may behave differently in different situations and things like that. Okay, that's normal. That's being human. But when it comes down to it, are you an integral person? And that integral integer, right? A whole number is what an integer is. Are you a whole person? Do you have all of those components of your family, your faith, your relationships with others, your work, your finances, all of those? If you think about the wheel of life, right, that Zig Ziglar popularized, if you look at all of those components, are they all whole? And what I think happens to a lot of us is we'll focus on one or two things, and those things are good, but everything else is struggling. Everything else feels out of control. Everything else feels like it's not going on. And we just came out of 2020, the year of out of control. That doesn't lead to healthy relationships. That doesn't lead to physical health. I mean, it makes us sick. Stress makes you sick. It doesn't lead to healthy careers. Instead, it leads to that feeling. 85% of people say that they hate their job. If you stop and think about that, 85% of people, when surveyed, said they hate their job. That to me that's a scary statistic.
Yeah.
It means when you go to your doctor's office, there's a really good chance, if there's 10 employees, that 8 of them hate their job. I don't know about you, but that's a little scary to me. What if it's the guy that's doing the surgery on me and he hates his job? I kind of want him to love what he does. So it's not a good thing. It's not a healthy thing. And that authenticity is about getting in touch with who you really are meant to be by God. Who are you designed to be? And then designing your life so that those things can be realized. Putting everything in place. We call it refocusing, gain control, and set a plan.
Mhm.
Refocus on what's important to you, gain control of those pieces that are not in control, and then set a plan so that you can execute and do what you want to do, because it doesn't necessarily have to look the same for every person. It doesn't have to look, there's nothing wrong with being an employee if that's what you want to do and what you feel called to do. I just don't want you being an employee because you feel like that's the only thing you can do. You know,
Mm-hmm.
same
Mm-hmm.
thing for being a small business owner. You know, I don't want people to go launch a business because I like being self-employed. You know, they've got to love it. They've got to want to do it. They've got to, that's got to be their calling and their passion. And that's what I mean by authentic life.
So let's revisit that Zig Ziglar wheel, that visual illustration, because I know there's guys listening thinking, yeah, they're visualizing their own wheel, and they may be thinking, I'm crushing it here, here, and here, but this area is totally empty, and this one I'm struggling. It's like, what can guys do to rectify that? And how does stewardship play into this? Because
So let's
stewardship is more than just pinching pennies.
Right. Let's define the word stewardship, because I think you're right. Usually, when someone hears the word stewardship, if they're in Christian circles, you know, first off, it is a Christian word to most people. If they're in Christian circles, what they just heard was grab your wallet, we're starting a building campaign. Okay. Because that seems to be how most churches use it. And that's really unfortunate. Let's go back to the Bible. The word or the term steward, when it's used in the Bible, it's because if you go into the King James Bible, it was written during a time when, you know, there were lords of castles in medieval times, and sort of, you know, the lord's domain was a certain area and people worked for them. And the steward was the person who was appointed by the lord of the castle to run the estate. Their job was to make sure that if the king or the lord went off to war or went to visit somebody else, that when they came back, the house was still standing. You know, things were still taken care of, money was still being made, people were still being served, you know, the folks that lived there were being taken care of, but also that the lord's resources were being taken care of. A good steward would also grow those resources. The steward didn't own any of it, but they were well taken care of, right? They were provided for. They often lived in a, you know, nice house. They had nice clothes and that sort of thing. So this isn't like a poor mentality. Instead, it's a mentality of, I don't own it, but my job is to manage it for the good of everyone who's around me,
Mm.
at the at the behest, at the command of the Lord. Okay, so, you know, now you see why it's a Christian word, right? The Lord here, of course, is God, and we're given resources by God. Those resources are our time, our talents, our treasures, you know, who we are, what we think, what we do, how we spend our day every day. All of that belongs to God. But we're called to manage it and grow it in a way that serves not just ourselves and our family and takes care of us. That's important, but also goes out beyond that, pours out beyond the walls of our family, and takes care of other people and serves other people's needs. And whether that's spending time, whether that's spending money, doesn't matter. It's all the same mindset. And it's that mindset of, I'm not the owner, but I am called to take care of this and use it well. And so if you look at your calendar and your checkbook and you do an audit, could
Yeah.
you answer, you know, the question, are you using all these resources to the best of your ability to serve others and to serve God? And if the answer is no, well, maybe you want to change something. And
Mm.
that's really what it's about.
Such a powerful concept too, because everything that you just outlined there, I mean, women can contribute to this most definitely, but men's biblically, our roles are leaders of the home.
Right.
That is our role. What you just outlined, that is our role as men, as leaders in the home, is
Mm-hmm.
stewarding not just our money, but our time, our resources, our energy, everything as it relates to how it's going to benefit those around us.
Right.
It's
And our
powerful.
relationships
And our
too.
relationships. Yeah.
You know, again, if you have children, are you spending time with your children? Uh, it, it's horrible to wake up one day and have a 13-year-old that you recognize that you don't know.
Mm. Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, and yet I know men that have had that experience. You know, I had a little bit of it. That's one of the reasons I quit my day job, because I was traveling so much that I was becoming disconnected from my wife and my child.
Yeah. Well, and let's just be real here for a second. All kids do get to an age where over a summer, it's like, man, I don't I don't know this kid because they're changing, they're going through puberty and whatnot. So it just emphasizes the need for us to pour into those, steward those relationships, so that when they do go through those times of transition, we've got a relationship there that we can work through it.
Correct. Yeah. And I'm not, yeah, when I say don't know them, I'm not saying, yes, most 13-year-olds, again, I was a teacher of middle school. I've seen this. If you say anything to them, you get the eye roll and, oh, whatever, whatever kind of thing. And then they'll go, I'm not talking about necessarily you feel like you know everything about them, but are you still connected to them? My son actually freaked a bunch of people out once. I was on a mastermind call with a bunch of other men because I firmly believe in being in groups and surrounding myself with other men to pour into me and just let I pour into them. And he came into the room and realized I was at a call and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt." And I'm like, "No, it's okay. What do you need, son?" And he said, "I just want to tell you good night and that I love you." And he gave me a hug. And he's 15. Okay.
Wow.
He's 260, and over, 6'3" at the time, he's 6'4" now, so he towers over me, and kind of leans down, gives me a big bear hug and goes off. And literally every other man on the call was like, "Okay, that's awesome."
That is
and
awesome.
It's now, again, that's not saying that to brag. That's as much him as it is anything my wife and I did. It's how his heart is wired. But it's part of that is creating that environment where even at 15, he still feels comfortable expressing an emotion. I did not have that relationship with my father at all. I was raised by an alcoholic father. I was raised in a, emotionally abusive household. I can remember him saying, "I love you" to me twice in my entire life. And once because I asked him, the other time was spontaneous. So I deliberately said, I do not want that relationship with my son. I am going to have not a perfect relationship. Trust me, it is not perfect, but a better one. Okay. And so I've told him, I tell him every single day, "I love you, son."
Yeah.
At least once, usually more than once. But, when he messes up, "I love you. The behavior and the choice that you just made has consequences. Here's the consequence." It's not you. I love you. But when you did this, it creates a consequence. Now here's the consequence. And because of that, I think he's grown to be a pretty good, solid young man. And he knows that I love him. You can ask him, "Does your dad love you?" He'll say yes. Because of, he's heard it, his entire life, but he's also seen it,
Yeah, man, you can't ask for anything more as a father.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm blessed.
100%.
This podcast is part of the Edify Podcast Network. Edify is a faith-inspiring app that brings together thousands of the best Christian podcasts in one place for your listening enjoyment. Cut through the noise and grow your faith by diving into the world's top Christian podcasts today. Download the Edify app for free from the App Store or Google Play, or by going to edify.app. That's EDIFI.app.
Now that we've kind of segued into kids, going back to specifically the money aspect of stewardship, and maybe there's other aspects that can factor into this question, but when you think of, because I've got a soon to be 12-year-old and am in the midst of this right now, trying to instill into him the value of a dollar, and how to manage their money. And so I guess my question to you is like, how do you instill into your kids, especially in this culture that we're in, you need the latest clothes, the nicest car, the biggest house you can buy, this culture of more and more and more. And that's what they're exposed to when they go out to school and hang out with their friends outside of the home. It's like, so how do you instill this concept of stewardship when we exist in this culture that is definitely not of the mindset of stewarding anything?
Right. And kind of in the mindset of consumption.
Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with, first off, you want to start this as early as you can. Now, if you haven't started it already and, you've got a 14-year-old, fine, start it now. If you've got a 12-year-old, start it now. If you've got a 3-year-old, you can still start it. So one of the things that I always suggest to parents is give the child some money from the very beginning. But here's the caveat.
Yep.
Never put your child on allowance. Instead, put them on commission.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the world that God has created, at least today, works under the concept of work, you get to eat. You know, don't work, you don't eat well. You know, this is kind of how the world works. It's a cause and effect world.
Socialism.
You know, it's a cause and effect world.
Yep.
You know, and so this is kind of the place that we've, you know, the world that we live in. And so literally at 3 years old, we put our son on commission. You have a list of chores, you do the chores, you make money. You don't do the chores, you don't get paid from day one. And now, granted, at 3, one of his chores is cleaning up his room. Okay, that really meant Mom and I cleaned up his room and he kind of halfway participated, because at 3, they really don't know what cleaning up their room means. But now, like, he does his own laundry. You know, Mom does not do his laundry. He's been doing his laundry for years. It's, you want clean clothes, son? There's a washing machine. Let's teach you how to use it. You know, and again, now he doesn't actually even get commission per se. He still has a few things that he does around the house. And by the way, you don't have to give him commission for everything. There are certain things that they do just because they're part of the family.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's important.
It's not, they get paid for everything. You do this because you live here, you know, and you love Mom and you love Dad, and this is what you do. But there's other things that you can tie to that and begin teaching that relationship between effort creates money. So one of the greatest moments I ever had is my son at like 6 or 7 comes to me and says, you know, Dad, based on the list of chores that I have, I've been making this much a week for the last 4 years. I think I deserve a raise, you know, because I'm doing more now and I'm doing it better. I need a raise. All right, what do you think you deserve? You know, and so we literally negotiated for more money. You know,
that's a valuable life skill too.
Wonderful life skill. You know, I'm literally, you know, I'm acting all, you know, oh, okay, what do you know, and in my head I'm going, yay, you know, and he did. He got a little raise and that sort of thing. So you begin from the very beginning. At the very beginning, you start teaching them some of everything you get, you give. Period. So we started dividing money up, and you know, he got $5. He got to spend a certain amount. He had to save a certain amount, and a certain amount went to giving. Mm-hmm. For us, that was a tithe to the church. But again, if that's not your pattern, fine. I still think you have to give. There's always a giving component. And so we did that from the very beginning. He still tithes on every penny that he earns. Now he earns money. He goes out and he actually mows people's yards and he gets paid for that. He earned like $2,000 in 3 months a couple of summers ago because he wanted it for a trip. But it's because from the very beginning we started instilling that work ethic and that idea. And it does affect more than just their money, because they start to see, wait a minute, if I play video games all day long, I don't get my chores done, I didn't get paid. And yet I want that Xbox or that game or that whatever. Yeah. You have to have those tough conversations of sitting down with them sometimes. And they're like, I want the latest Xbox game. And it's like, great. You have the money for it? Yeah. No, you don't get it.
Yeah.
Okay. And, you know, and trust me, the first time you have a screaming kid in, you know, Walmart or Toys R Us or whatever, back when Toys R Us existed, who's yelling and screaming about, you know, they want, you know, it's not fun, but it's worth it, because eventually they're like, they figure it out, you know. So it really comes down to just teaching those lessons. The other thing is we started involving him at a young age. We started showing him, you know, this is the electric bill. This is the phone bill. You know, this is how much it costs to live. You know, when you leave the lights on, this number goes up. You know, and this is why we're yelling at you to turn off the lights. It's not because we're, you know, the light police. Mm-hmm. It's because it wastes electricity, and begin to teach him those lessons. We put him on his own budget and started, you know, these are items. We would have spent this much on your school clothes. So we're going to deposit this much in your account. We're going to go shopping for school clothes. If you're frugal, you know, we still get veto power, you know, so if you want to buy something and we look at it and go, that ain't coming into our house, we get veto power because we're Mom and Dad, you know, but at the same time, guess what? He started finding deals. He started going, wait a minute, I can buy 4 of this pair of jeans and 1 of that pair of jeans. I can have 4 pairs and have money left over, and that money stays in my bank and I get to spend it. It's his money. So we started teaching him to do that. It's all of those things, all of those patterns. I mentioned the $2,000 in 3 months. That's because he wanted a trip to Washington, D.C. We're like, great, we'll pay this much. You have to earn the rest. He got out there and hustled, and I don't know how many yards he mowed, but it was a lot in Texas in the summer.
Yeah.
This is not fun.
Yeah. He's working.
No, there's a reason people will pay you to mow their lawn in Texas in the summertime. Nobody wants to do it. It's miserable. He's out there mowing. He earned like $2,200 in like 3 months. Okay. Because he, again, he knew it. I mean, he knew how to do it. He knew what to do. And we helped him with it. I mean, we took him to yards and, helped haul and he used our lawnmower and that sort of thing. But you begin to instill that lesson. What's interesting is the next summer he hired some of his friends and he went and got jobs, paid his friends some money. He kept the extra money.
He scaled the business.
But he figured out pretty quickly. He's like, wait a minute, I can get more yards done quicker if I do this. It's like, yeah, you have employees now, son. This is called running a business, So he's already starting to figure that idea out too.
That is awesome. These are some really powerful parenting tactics. And just the underlying theme here that I'm hearing is no matter what it is, start them young.
Absolutely.
And if they're older, start now, but you can never start too young. And the sooner you help them wrap their brains around these concepts, big ones like tithing, and budgeting, like, and not sheltering them from the real world. Like you said, show them the bills, help them understand like what it costs to live and the choices you make today, the impact that they have on your pocketbook. Right. So that when they get out into the real world, like we see with so many not youth, but the millennials or the
young adults,
some of them are just shell shocked because they've been sheltered from all of that their entire lives. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see what we see in the news today, I think, is just because they have no clue of what the real world is about.
Right. And it is a matter of, it's not, we always want to protect our kids. We don't want our kids to hurt. We don't want our kids to make mistakes that we've made. We want to take care of them. That's a normal human parenting response.
Yep.
But sometimes it's how do you define hurt and how do you define help?
Yeah.
Letting them screw up in little ways.
Absolutely.
Is helpful. Letting them fall and skin their knee and get up and figure out that, they're not dying. And they can keep playing.
Controlled failures are doing them a service in the long run.
But it doesn't, I will tell you in the moment, it doesn't feel like that. No. You do walk out of the room later going, oh, I can't believe that. Oh, I feel, and mom and I would go to the room and kind of cry on each other's shoulders. And then, you go back out and it's this strong face again, we're united in this, but you have to let them screw up. You have to let them make mistakes. You have to let them fall down. It's all part of becoming, we're back to that authentic self. That's part of that journey to the authentic self. Whether you're an adult dealing with it, whether you're a child, it really doesn't matter. Now, the difference is, as a child, you're not fully baked yet. A young adult doesn't think about the future the same way a 30-year-old does.
Sure.
They just don't. That's not because they're bad. That's not because there's anything wrong with them. It's just they don't yet. They haven't got. This is why teenage drivers are dangerous. They don't really yet think about consequences and long-term actions completely. That doesn't mean you don't begin to have those conversations with them. That doesn't mean you don't let them screw up. That doesn't mean you don't let them fall occasionally on their face and then, kind of pick them up and go, hurts when that happens, don't it? Don't do that again. And again, I think we do that as adults too. Some of us do that at 40. That's the first time we kind of have to face it.
Yeah.
It's true. Because I'm not of the school of thought that, oh, the younger generation is going to heck in a handbasket. And, but I actually did some research one time and I found quotes about how the younger generation was going to doom us all. And I literally went back all the way to Aristotle. So literally every generation since at least the Greek times has basically said, world's going to heck in a handbasket because of this younger generation that's coming. It's a theme, folks. Okay.
That's actually somewhat comforting to hear.
It is, right?
I found myself thinking the same thing. So at the end of the day, it's probably going to be all right.
It's probably going to work out. It's not going to be ideal, not going to be perfect, but let's face it, no generation has been ideal or perfect.
So kind of segueing into the next generation, young adults, maybe even older adults, I've got two older kids. I've got a 12-year-old, soon to be 12-year-old, and I've got a 20-year-old and a 24-year-old. Mm-hmm. And the oldest is married and she's got a kid. And so my mind is on occupying both ends of the spectrum in terms of parenthood. And so when I think about my older kids, especially the one that's married and they're starting their life, the work that you've done, what observations have you made maybe I should say, what are some common mistakes that you see people making that can be avoided?
Okay.
And this centers around more of the money issue, but just this whole conversation.
It's both. It still falls into money and time. Let's kind of, and actually let's split it up that way. So when it comes to time, when it comes to productivity, first off, I don't like the term time management because we all have 24 hours in a day. We manage ourselves. We don't manage our time, but we do need to manage our own energy. We need to manage our own, productivity, what we're getting done, efficiency, whatever term you want to use.
Sure.
One of the biggest mistakes I've seen people make is they don't begin to connect what they do with the results that they get. It feels like things happen to us instead of we happen to things. And it's recognizing that, between cause and effect, there, for us as human beings, we're blessed with the ability to think and have free will. So we're supposed to think and have free will and then respond. And I think a lot of us lose track of that. Young adults especially, but it happens with older adults too. This is not exclusively a crime of the youth. And it's being intentional about looking at what we're doing, what results are we getting. And so starting with just a time audit. I do what I call a 30-minute miracle or 15-minute miracle, where literally take a piece of paper, put every 30 minutes down on it, set an alarm on your watch that vibrates every 30 minutes. And every 30 minutes, just jot down, what did you do in that last 30 minutes? Not detailed. You don't have to write a 16-paragraph essay, but just, I was on Facebook, I watched Netflix, whatever, what did you do? And do that for about a week, and then go back and look at it and start color coding it. Which of these are tasks that were important things? Which of these were just things that I was responding to? Classify. And after you've classified it, begin to think about, now what can I do to begin to structure my life differently? What do I want to get rid of? What do I want to keep? What do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? So it's being intentional. With money, it's much the same. The biggest mistake that people make is they sacrifice their future at the altar of today. What I mean by that is we leverage what's coming down the road because we want it all now. So we want the nice house, we want the brand new phone, we want the nicest jeans, we want the best car, we want the coolest job, we want the, whatever, the 2.5 dogs and a child and, whatever. All of these things, and we want it all now. And because of that, we use debt, we leverage our future, because that's really what debt is you're promising future income to get something today.
Yeah.
So you're leveraging your future for your present.
Yeah.
And
because it's so easy.
Trust me, you can find somebody to get, I tell people all the time about getting out of debt because people are like, I'm not sure if I'm going to like getting out of debt. I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. You can go right back into debt. It's easy. I mean, that'll take you 30 seconds. It's, if you don't like it, go back, no big deal. Real truth is, if you've done it and you've done it well and you've done it the right way, where you've legitimately changed your behavior, you're not going to go back. But you could, because you can find somebody on every street corner that'll lend you money. A lot of them in not good ways too.
Yeah.
Student loan, credit card, car payment, and so they've leveraged their future, and because of that, they get so strapped that it's I owe, so it's off to work I go. They've got handcuffs into what they're doing because they've leveraged every penny that they have, and now they're stuck.
Yeah, got to keep feeding that monster.
Yeah, and it just becomes a cycle. It becomes a pattern. I've worked with people at 65, still have debt. I've worked with people at 25. And I don't just work with people to get out of debt. Actually, most of my clients are small business owners and are doing well. They usually have some debt, but it's usually not astronomical. But it's really more about having that mindset of, wait a minute, I can do a few things today that are relatively small sacrifices a lot of times and create a much better future. Because the problem in both of these cases is this mindset. I told you everything ties back to mindset of, I don't know about you, but future me is Superman. Future me is going to get everything done, have the beauty, everything's going to be perfect for future me, right? I can always put it off to the future because future me will clean up the mess. Future me will fix it. Future me will take care of the problem. Guess what? Future you is just you. If you're not able to do it today, you're not going to be doing it in the future either a lot of times. And so it's recognizing, no, if I want to create a better future, I have to start creating it today and be intentional about that and go through that in a logical way. And so that may mean paying off debt. That may be, structuring things with your income to be more responsible. That may be about having, accountability around what's really important to you and figuring that out and then creating that. That may be starting a new business. That may be, you're not giving or tithing the way you think you should, and you need to restructure that. All of these are areas where coaching, where working with people, where restructuring it, we're coming in and being intentional. Just like I said, do a time audit, do a money audit.
Yeah.
Look at your money, figure out where it's going, figure out whether it's lined up with what you say is important to you. If the answer is no, you got to change it. You got to do something different.
Dave Ramsey has a quote that I've always kind of liked, and I'm not going to get it quite right, but it's something like, live like no other, so that later on in life you can live like no other.
Live like no one else so that later you can live like no one else.
There you go. Yeah, and that's powerful.
And it is. It's recognizing that what you do today has an effect on the future. And therefore, if you want to improve your future, you got to improve your present. You've got to change what you're doing today. And change is never easy. Change is never fun. It's worth it.
Yeah. So first, I have to say, I really love the idea of doing a time audit, like the idea of a money audit. I mean, everybody, or not everybody, but the idea of going back and looking to see how you spent your money is a pretty common idea. Mm-hmm. But, I do what's called time blocking on my calendar. I've got my ideal week set up in my Google Calendar, but I don't think I've ever gone back and really analyzed, okay, did I actually adhere to it? And how did I've got a block of time carved out for a specific thing, but then did I actually do it? I'm going to do this exercise. That's really good.
Mm-hmm. I actually have a planning sheet that folks can get access to that lets you kind of plan your week. But then as you go through your week, what you're supposed to do is update it to reflect what you really did. And so you actually do see this was my ideal plan versus, wait, this is what I actually did. And it's a good way of beginning to figure out, are you doing enough deep work time? Are you doing enough family time? Are you doing those things that you say are important to you? So that's actually a tool that I recommend that people do.
Yeah, very cool. So as we kind of wrap up here, guys that, again, at the onset of this conversation, you said know what they need to do, but don't do it. For guys listening who, they hear everything you're saying and they're nodding their heads, but they don't do it because they're either, and maybe this is specific to money, but maybe there's fear there. Maybe there's lack of confidence that they just can't do it. Or maybe there's just a perceived lack of time, whatever the reason. what advice do you have for those guys listening that just aren't doing what they need to do?
So let's start with a couple of things. One is kind of philosophical, the other is practical. So from a philosophical standpoint, you want to know what the problem is? Go look in the mirror. You want to know what the solution is? Go look in the mirror. Okay. You are your biggest enemy and you are your biggest asset. Your beliefs, your mindset, how you do things, are you leading your family? Are you being a good steward of yourself and of others? Are you finding ways to be a servant leader? That doesn't mean you have to be in a position of leadership. Are you doing those sorts of things? Is fundamentally up to you. Now, that being said, I'm also a firm believer of no man is an island. You need to surround yourself with accountability through other men. And
Yep.
yeah, again, I said this earlier, but I am a firm believer of men need other men in their lives who will hold them accountable and kick their rear end when they need it.
100%.
Whether that's a mastermind group, whether that's a coach, like what I do, whether that's a church group, whether that's whatever. Okay. There's a ton of them out there. Access something like that. Share what's important to you. Share what you're trying to do. Talk to them in a safe space, but invite them to then hold you accountable to that. Invite them to challenge you to actually follow through on that. There is something, and I think it's not unique to men, but I think men need it. And again, culturally, I think we've moved away from it, where men need that accountability from other men. We can say things to each other, we can do things with each other that we're not going to hear the same way from our wife or our girlfriend or other folks or our parents, especially if you're a younger adult. And so it's availing yourself of those accountability tools is, I think, the number one underutilized tool for becoming a better you. And a lot of that is just the embarrassment factor. We don't want to go in front of a group of men and say, I suck at this. Guess what? They probably aren't perfect either.
Right.
There are no perfect people. I'm not I've been studying productivity for 35 years. Guess what? There's days that I have and nothing works right. Okay. I have them too. And I've been studying this stuff for 35 plus years. I've been studying finances for decades. I still screw it up occasionally. Okay. I literally, I'll share a personal story. I transferred some money out of my wife has a business account because she runs a little business on the side. And I transferred some money from her account because I forgot that she told me leave some money in her account because she was running something from it. We had an overdraft on that account. I think that's the first overdraft I've had in like 30 years. It's stupid, and I literally looked at her and went, I know you told me this. And I did it anyway, just because it slipped my mind. So none of us are perfect with it, but it's, again, in the scheme of things, it was not a real big deal. I just put some money back in the account and covered the fees and everything's fine. But it illustrates the point of we're going to screw it up.
Right.
But by having those people around you, when you screw it up, instead of beating yourself up, they can help lift you up and you move forward again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's powerful. And like you said, you don't need to be perfect.
No.
But just start and you'll improve over time. Just start. And by surrounding yourself with the right people, they can help you get there faster.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, Scott, this has been really good. The last question I have for you, and I try to ask all of my guests, is this idea of legacy. Legacy, a lot of people associate money with legacy, and that's certainly part of it, but I think it can be so much more. So when you hear the phrase an inspired legacy, if you want to leave an inspired legacy, what does that mean to you?
So to me, are you making a dent in the universe? And now let me define that because I'm using a phrase to define a phrase. Are you, in whatever circle you operate in, whatever your world is, and the world doesn't mean the whole world. That could be literally just, your family. It could just be your wife. It could just be your child. It could just be your church, whatever your sphere of influence is. Are you leaving that better than it was when you got there? You know, it's like the old Boy Scout motto, you know, when you used to camp, we were always told, I was a Boy Scout, we were told, leave the campground better when you leave than it was when you got there. You know, if there was firewood there, leave more firewood. If it was clean, make it cleaner. You know, whatever it is, leave it better. And I kind of look at it the same way with what we do in our sphere of influence. Are you making your sphere of influence a little bit better so that when you leave, it's better than it was when you got there? That could be leaving a monetary legacy. That could be, you know, changing, that could be creating a business that changes people's lives. That could be solving an immediate problem. That could just simply be loving your kid. It isn't necessarily a big or a small thing. It's all of those things, you know, because I think sometimes we hear legacy and we think, oh, if I don't leave, you know, $10.2 million and that's not leaving a legacy. Oh, no, it is. Because the circles that you put out into the world, every person that you touch and you make their life a little bit better, they also touch 100 to 150 people. You know, your smile at someone in the morning may have literally saved someone's life.
Yeah.
And you don't ever know it.
Yeah. 100%. Love it, man. Scott, I've really enjoyed this. I could keep going. But I've got to wrap this up. Where can people go to learn more about what you do?
Absolutely. So my home base is inspiredstewardship.com. I actually created a page with some resources for folks that are listening. If you go to inspiredstewardship.com/legacy,
Perfect.
Then you can find, you know, that basically that time. If you sign up for the timesheet, you'll get the time budget that I mentioned earlier, the audit that you can do. There's one on talent. There's one on treasures. If you just sign up for one of them, you can get all three. So don't freak out and go, well, I have to sign up for all of them. Just get one at a time. It's fine, and work through them. That'll run you through like a little 5-day challenge. That's all free. At the bottom, there's also a link if you'd like to set up a 30-minute call with me. Again, no obligation, no fees, nothing like that. If you got a specific question and you just want to jump on a Zoom call like we're having and ask that, there's a link to that as well. And then you can also find out more about my coaching over there at inspiredstewardship.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll link over to all that in the show notes. Scott, I want to thank you for your time, man, and really, really enjoyed this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I've loved being here, and I hope your listeners get some value from it.
Thanks, man. Guys, thanks for listening. If you got anything out of today's episode, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're using to listen to this right now. And if you're looking for a brotherhood of other like-minded men, guys who like to talk about the kinds of things you heard today, then I encourage you to check out the private Facebook group for the Inspired Legacy. There's a link to the group in today's show notes, as well as a link to leave an Apple Podcast rating and review for the show. And that just helps us get the Inspired Legacy podcast in front of more men. So remember, like, subscribe, leave a review, and share our message, because when we work together to lift up fatherhood, we're going to change the world one dad at a time. Until next time, live inspired.